Okay, so to get things started, since fate is our topic, let's just amend the word, shall we?
What do you mean?
Because fate is not a word a scientist would ever use.
No, they don't.
They'd get laughed out of their peer-reviewed parties. They use words like genetic predispositions, genes, basically.
Although there'd be another scientist in the room who'd say, well, it isn't really the genes, it's the environment.
Yeah. Another guy would walk in and be like, no, it's nature.
Nurture.
Nature.
Right.
Really, this argument, on some level, when it's a very old argument, is about choice versus fate. And that tension gets really fascinating when you talk about something like willpower. And Candy, let me introduce you to a guy. His name's Walter.
Walter Michel
He's a psychologist.
at Columbia University in the psychology department.
So what's going to happen is...
He has done a remarkable study. So are we ready to go? And the marshmallow study.
The marshmallow study.
At the start of the study, how did you come up with the idea?
Well, I had 3 little girls who at that time
We're talking now late 60s.
were going from being these sweet sometimes and yappy often, little creatures.
How old were they at that point?
Well, they ranged in age from 2 to 5. And what any parent immediately knows is that when kids start going into the 4th year of life, a lot happens to them.
Like he noticed that one of his daughters who had just hit 4, suddenly she could delay gratification.
Yeah.
Almost all of a sudden. If he told her, look, I know you want that, I don't know, pack of bubble gum, but don't whine, don't complain. When we get home, I'll give you something better. Suddenly, she could wait.
This was in the late 1960s, and there was almost no work on, quote, willpower or self-control or self-regulation. It just wasn't a topic.
So he thought he would jump in. Here's what he did. To test this hypothesis that something happens to kids around the age of 4, he went to a nursery school,
Big nursery school at Stanford University.
gathered up a bunch of kids of different ages, and one by one, he put them in a room.
A small room off the playroom.
He'd bring the kids in, sit them in a chair, and then he would give them a choice, which had to do with marshmallows.
Yummy.
What kid doesn't love marshmallows? And he would say to them, here's your choice. You can either have one
One marshmallow,
now, or if you wait, you can have 2
2 marshmallows
later.
Now, that creates a lot of dilemmas.
Yeah, it does. Especially because, the researchers would leave the room to give the kids a chance to think, and right there on the table, in front of the child, were the marshmallows, calling them.
There are no distractions in the room. There are no pictures. There are no toys.
The
There's
child
no
is left to
anything.
stare
Okay, so it's
at the
basically it's an
marshmallows.
isolation chamber.
Pure agony.
I can show you a video of what they're doing, and you can see it.
Can we watch?
Sure. Well, let's turn it on. And,
He walked over
I
to a
think it'll
TV
speak
and pulled
for
up
it.
a video
Now,
of the
these
marshmallow
are- let me
experiment.
explain.
And I must tell you, it is some of the greatest video ever shot, particularly because the round he showed us, the researchers had replaced the marshmallows with something even more enticing.
Oreo cookies.
Oreos.
So what you're seeing over here is a tortured-looking, adorable little girl wearing a blue sweatshirt,
About 5 years old, pigtails.
kind of sniffing at it.
She puts her face right up to the cookie. She's weighing, do I want this
It's
badly enough?
exactly what she's doing.
She picks up the cookie, puts it down.
Weighing and reevaluating her choice.
She knows she can have this one now, but if she waits, she can have more. But
I've had it.
she gives in after just a few minutes. Okay, now we have a sort of a doughy-faced boy in a yellow t-shirt who's kicking because he's so antsy. This kid's strategy is not to confront the cookie directly, but to kick the table that holds the cookie. Kick it, kick it, kick
And
it.
it's a very male response. I mean,
But remarkably, he holds out. Way longer than the first girl. And of course, there were the cheaters.
here we see a guy looking at the 2 cookies. He's
picked one
taken one, which is against the rules. He's licking the inside. He's licking out the cream, replacing the licked cookie and putting it back on the tray.
Anyhow, we watch kid after kid after kid being tortured by the gravitational pull of Oreo cookies. Some, to avoid the pull, went under the table. Some turned their backs and started singing a song. All in all, Michel and his team tested 500 kids in that initial study, and they found that yes, 4-year-olds are dramatically better than younger kids at resisting temptation. So something does happen at around 4 years old. But within that, and here's where the plot thickens, there was a huge range. Some kids gave up after a minute. Others could last 20 minutes. And most fell somewhere in the middle, where they could resist the cookie for about...
7 minutes, 8 minutes.
That's the average.
all depending on age and what the goodies are and so on.
Now, in and of itself, there's nothing too surprising here. He basically confirmed his hypothesis. But what is amazing, truly amazing, is what happens next.
I just was sitting around the kitchen table with my kids about 5-6 years after the studies began.
And he was talking with his kids, and he knew that they still went to school, this is now 5 or 6 years later, with some of those kids from the initial study. So he's asking them,
You know, how is Jenny doing? And how's Cecily doing? This was just totally informal.
and his kids told him, well, Cecily's doing fine. Jenny, not so good. And he began to realize a weird pattern. The kids, like Cecily, who he remembered had been good at waiting for the marshmallow back in the study, well, they
Seemed to be the ones who were doing better.
were doing better at school.
And suddenly, on a very small end, very small sample, it looked like there were differences here. Could there be a relationship between the number of seconds these kids waited when they were 4 and how they're doing when they're 10 and 11 and 12? So what we did, beginning when these kids were 15 years old, 14 to 17 years old, was the first follow-up wave.
So he tracked down as many of those original kids as he could find. And just for starters, he looked at their SAT scores. Now keep in mind, this is 10 years later, and some stupid little test that a kid takes when they're 4 that has to do with resisting a marshmallow and how many seconds they can resist should not, I repeat, not have anything to do with how they do on their SAT scores, which is one of the most important tests they're ever going to take. But
we found remarkable correlations between the actual SAT scores and seconds of delay time.
in other words, the kids who waited the longest when they were 4, staring at the Oreos, did better on the SATs than the
Yes.
kids who just gave up immediately?
Yes,
How much better?
significantly.
The differences are so big.
That's Jonah Lehrer, science writer, often a guest on the show, who's also reporting about these follow-up studies.
You know, the difference between a kid who can wait 1 minute for the marshmallow and a kid who can wait 20 minutes, the difference in the SAT scores is 210 points.
No way.
Yeah, this isn't, fiddling at the margins. This is a profound difference.
Well above what one would expect by chance.
And as they dug into the data, it turned out it went way beyond SATs. The kids who waited back when they were 4, now in their late teens,
Parents reported they were better behaved.
and on the flip side, the kids who hadn't been able to wait back in that initial study, they were more likely now to be suspended from school, to be classified as problem kids, to be, the kind of kids who
Were most likely to wind up as the bullies.